Happy Wednesday, everyone. Hi, Melissa. Hi, Dawn, Christy, Libby, Erica. How you doing?
Did you get my email about the agenda correction?
I did not. I didn't look at emails this afternoon. What's the correction?
It's to item 11.1. Some dollar amounts needed to be changed. Where it says request for approval of sale of general obligation bonds in the amount of 20,315,000.
Yep.
That should be 20,312,200.
Okay.
And then on the third line where it says debt refunding in the amount of 4,337,500, it should be 4,334,700.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Erica. Okay, I'll call the October 6th Select Board meeting to order. I'll go over everyone's favorite script before we get into it. We're using Zoom webinar for meetings, which allows for the public to participate in the meeting as an attendee. Attendees must register to participate. Please register. People registering to be an attendee must use their names, otherwise they will not be allowed to participate in the discussion. Attendees will join in listening mode. Chair will call on those who have raised their hands in order they were raised. All questions to be directed to the chair. Now we're going to confirm member access. All board members, please confirm that you are here when I call your name. Melissa Murphy.
Here.
Dawn Holgate.
Here.
Christy Ferrantella.
Here.
Matt Fee.
Here.
Thank you. And staff, as I see you, Erica Mooney.
Present.
Libby Gibson.
Present.
Amy Baxter.
Here.
Mr. Brian Turbot.
In attendance.
Vincent Murphy.
Here.
Roberto Santa Maria.
In attendance.
Sheila Lucy.
I'm here.
Hi, Sheila. I think that's it. And anticipated speakers from Arcadis, we have Kate Edwards and Jennifer Latchman.
Lockmeyer.
Oh, Lackmeyer. Sorry, I didn't see it. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi, Kate. I think that's everybody on here that I see. Okay. We finish up this script. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Select Board is convening video conference via Zoom. Please note that the meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. All supporting members that have been provided to the members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. Public is encouraged to follow along with the posted agenda. And let's see, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. Members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through the chair. Taking care to identify yourself, and I believe that's it. Okay, so we called the order. There's no change to the agenda that I know of. Libby, over to you for announcements.
Thank you. We do have a couple of new announcements, but we have the standard announcements. This meeting is being video and audio recorded. The 131 Pleasant Street trailer is currently being used for vaccinations. It's the new location for the vaccine clinic. Sundays from 12 to 3, and there's a lot of more information on the town website. The couple of additional announcements are as follows. Town offices will be closed on Monday, October 11th in observance of Indigenous Peoples Day. And I think that Melissa Murphy was going to review an announcement regarding an upcoming event with the Cape Cod and Islands Commission on the Status of Women in partnership with the Nantucket Community Schools. And I think we're going to be able to show, there we go.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Oh, now I have to go back to what I was reading. Okay, so the Cape Cod and Islands Commission on the Status of Women will be hosting a listening circle at the Nantucket Community School on Saturday, October 23rd from 1:30 to 3 o'clock. The event is open to all women who live or work on Nantucket, allowing the commission to hear about and to assess the needs of women on the island. I'll just state that the mission of the Cape Cod and Islands Commission on the Status of Women is to provide a permanent, effective voice for women across Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard, and Nantucket. And the listening circles are a great way for the commission to hear from women to get a better understanding of the needs and concerns of women and families in our region. Sue Mintonen is our Nantucket representative to the commission. And the date again is October 23rd from 1:30 to 3 o'clock. Hopefully we can announce this at least one more time before the actual event. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Melissa. Was that it, Libby?
That was it, yes.
Okay. There's no follow-up comments from prior select board meetings. Over to public comment. Is there any comment from the public that is not currently on the agenda? Please raise your digital hand. Okay, we have John O'Connor. Still muted.
Is the topic of the town pier going to be discussed at this meeting on the agenda?
Yes, it is. And we have a continuation of a public hearing. Should be at the end of the meeting.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Any other public comment that's not on the agenda? Okay. Oh, sorry. Erica, I think Megan Perry has her hand up.
Thank you, Jason. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Sure. I was calling in just for a little bit of a better understanding of a couple of things that have been a tad confusing in the various media outlets. And I didn't know if through you, I could ask a couple questions.
Sure, you can. We might not be able to discuss it. We might get back to you on it, but please do. Please go
That'd be
ahead.
great. Okay, so my understanding is the select board is an elected governing body, correct?
That's correct, but go ahead.
Oh, okay, all right. And the Conservation Commission is appointed, a regulatory body appointed by the select board. And the select board has recently asked for the appointed Conservation Commission to reconsider a vote the Conservation Commission took. The vote involved an applicant where the select board is in partnership with the applicant, as the select board is the property owner and the appointed Conservation Commission is making a decision about that. The project the select board has asked the Conservation Commission to reconsider has met multiple failure criteria of the order of conditions, which the project was signed by all parties, being the applicant, Conservation Commission, Mass DEP, whatnot. So then the select board has also asked for the Conservation Commission to reconsider the vote and wait for the Arcadis report to come out. When the Arcadis draft report came out, it recommended no expansion of the geotubes, but the select board has gone into agreement behind closed doors of the executive session with SBPF to expand the geotubes, which would go against what the engineering company that was hired at $157,000 has recommended. So I guess one of my questions is, will those executive session meeting minutes now be available to the public so the public can see what was discussed? Since there's already an agreement in place, having those meeting minutes open to the public will not be detrimental to the agreement because the agreement's already been met. And then will that agreement address things such as, and I'm paraphrasing what the president of SBPF has said, that they'll basically walk away from the projects and not honor previous contracts that they've signed? Has something like that been addressed? And then my last question would be, is the select board, and I'm not sure if this is happening or not, is the select board still denying independent counsel for the Conservation Commission with regards to the GO2 projects and SBPF and the select board?
Thank you, Megan. We'll have somebody get back to you. Olivia, if you wanted to respond to some of that, you can, or we can get back to Megan and possibly in the follow-up comments for prior select board meetings can clarify some there.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, Megan. Any other public comment? Okay, we'll go to the COVID-19 update, Public Health Department. We have Roberto here with us tonight.
Good evening. So we are actually in much better shape than we could have been. We crossed the 2% positivity rate threshold, so we're now below 2%, which is really good news. The Board of Health meeting is October 21st, so we will be looking at all our options at that point. Libby already mentioned the vaccination clinic. We are currently doing the allotted third doses for the 65+ community. If you feel like you meet the third dose criteria, please let us know. Email us at health@nantucket-ma.gov, and we'll get back to you so that we can set an appointment. And then there has been a lot of discussions about the masks. I did a count this morning. There are still 44 other towns, so we're the 45th that still have indoor mask orders, and those towns include cities like Boston, Worcester, Springfield. Let me see the list here: Cambridge, Amherst. So they're not small towns. More than 2.5 million people in the state of Massachusetts are under mask orders. So these comments and complaints that we receive, including one that was in the INM just last week, those are all baseless. We are not the only town in the state of Massachusetts that still requires masks. Furthermore, there were comments about how there are certain events and event companies, people who represent event companies, saying that masks or orders aren't applied. As we're looking into it, as some companies like AEG, which is one of the largest companies out there who put on major events, are requiring masks and vaccines, which is stricter than what we require. So across the country, most of our country is still under mask orders, regardless of what it seems like out there. So definitely felt like we needed to clarify that. And then as we move forward, we're still waiting to hear back on the full approval of the Pfizer vaccine for children ages 5 to 11. Once we get that approval or denial, we'll be able to make a decision of where we go with those doses. And then the flu shots are available at the hospital. If you want your flu shot, please either call them at 508-825-1000 or go through your patient gateway. Just click on new appointments and it'll give you the option to make an appointment for the flu shot. It is really important to get the flu shot because we are out of a flu cycle. So many people during COVID did not get their flu shots, mainly because masks and the general social distancing ironically also stop the symptoms and the spread of flu. So most people have not been exposed to the most current strain of flu. So it's going to be, for lack of a better term, a virgin population. So everyone is susceptible. So we are recommending that as many people get the flu shots as possible as well. And then with that, I think we're set. I'll take questions.
Thanks, Roberto. Questions or comments? Well, that was helpful. I think the last couple of weeks I'm starting to get, text and questions and calls about the mask. Like, because we're doing so well, I think it makes sense why people would ask, why do we still have them relative to the height of the summer? So thanks for clarifying.
Yeah. No, we're definitely doing very well. We're doing very well. We're doing better than most in the rest of the country, especially in the rest of the state as well. But when things are low, you don't just let your guard down.
Okay, thanks, Roberto. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
There's no new business that I know of. We'll go over to approval of minutes of September 24th. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor by roll call: Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Don Holgate,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Jason Bridges, aye. That passes. So approval of payroll and treasury warrants for October 3rd and 6th.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Don Holgate,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Jason Bridges, aye. That passes unanimously. Pending contracts, any questions or anything you want to review with us, Libby?
Sorry, no, I don't think so unless the board has questions.
Matt?
No, my only question, there was 96,000 for the field house. That isn't an increase of the contract. Do we explain that?
Ryan? Ryan?
Matt, is that the first one?
Which was
38,000? Which one?
no, was it Sampson,
Yeah, there are two.
Weston and Sampson. And you're changing, it's the second one down. I believe you're adding 96 to ongoing contract amount. So I'm asking, is that an increase of the contract or just a reallocation of the 2 million dollars?
Brian and I discussed this. Oh, Brian. it's on.
Those are increases to the agreements, Matt. When we originally signed the agreements, it was only through the bidding phase. It did not include any of the work subsequent to the award of the contract for either ACG and or Weston and Sampson.
All right, so please take them separately. I'll vote against that, Jason.
Okay. Any other questions on pending contracts? Okay, so we'll take, let's vote on everything except the first two. All those in favor?
Do you need a motion?
I'm sorry. Yes, there's a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Don Holgate,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Jason Bridges, aye. Okay, now a motion on the first two pending
I'll make
contracts.
a motion to approve the two Weston and Sampson contracts.
Second.
All those in favor, Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Don Holgate,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella, Matt Fee,
I'm opposed, and I'd like to explain why. I think we're spending too much for this to begin with. And I don't like to see, I don't like to see add-ons to something that's too expensive to start with. So I can't support it. I think it's irresponsible. Thank you.
thank you, Matt. Jason Bridges, aye. That passes 4-1. Finishes up pending contracts. Over to reports. We have Arcadis presentation on final Baxter Road long-term planning summary of findings. Just want to kind of update the board a little bit. There was multiple parties interested in sending in their just comments and different things on this, and some came in before the deadline to post, some came after, and we didn't add them because I said we weren't going to be making any major decisions tonight, although we could give direction and come to consensus, but most likely we'll have another agenda item at a future board meeting to get more maybe into the details. I just wanted to open there. So anybody who's watching, I mean, I don't know what what my board members will do, but I'm suggesting us not to make any significant motions tonight, because this is, as the agenda item reads, that it's just a report. Okay, thank you, Kate and Jen and Vince. Go ahead.
Yep. Am I starting, Vince, or are you?
I can just give a super quick introduction, if that's all right, Jen.
Yeah.
So people may remember that this process started towards the end of January this year, and it was somewhat of a follow-on from the Developing Coast Resilience Plan as it was at the time. We went through an extensive consultation period with the main aim for that was to build consensus. The proposal and the contract was to look at 5 potential paths forward. And the project team are here tonight to explain the 5 potential paths and how ultimately retreat may be the one that might be needed, and potentially a new road network in the longer term. So, Jen, if you'd like to take it from there and explain how the project developed over time, please take it away through the chair.
Super. Yep. I think we can go to the next slide, Kate. So as Vince said, well, thank you for having us tonight. We did submit the final revised report, and we'll go over the summary of what we heard at the last meetings. We'll also orientate you to the report and the summary of the findings, and we'll talk about the next steps. So as Vince had said, this slide shows the overall project schedule, and we did submit the final report in your packages, which was just, I guess, last week. So we worked hard to stay on schedule. As you know, there were copious amounts of existing information to be reviewed and digested. But thank you for all the hard work that you've done over many years. So these were the tasks of our scope, and we have completed all the tasks. We did want to focus tonight a little bit on what we heard and, the pathways outlined in the report. So as you all know, since you were there, on September 14th, we held the large group meeting where we discussed the draft report. The large group meeting included all the stakeholder groups together. And the next slide shows the summary of what we heard at the last meeting and then what we modified or further addressed in the report since the draft report to the final report. So we heard about a desire to understand where this project fits in the overall scheme of things with the Coastal Resilience Plan priorities, the need for an island-wide sediment transport study and sediment budget. That was a recommendation in the Baxter Road study as well. Removal of the existing system will cause some bluff collapse. We went over that pretty clearly in the presentation on September 14th. There was continued concern and a lot more comments sent in on documents talking about downdrift impacts and sand mitigation. And really the overall view is outside the scope of this project, but we'll talk a little bit more about that on a further slide. And then there was a desire to understand immediate next steps for the road relocation and retreat. So we have added immediate next steps, and Kate will go over those in a little bit. So the summary of the findings memo, again, the goal was to reach consensus among the stakeholders. It was very challenging with the interested parties having strong opposing visions. And we discussed that in section 3 under the stakeholder engagement. We did feel that we do highlight in the report where the common areas were, which was, the love of the island, the love of the appreciation of the Baxter Road area and the historic walk along the area to the lighthouse. The scope of the study was not a comprehensive study. It was always meant to be a very focused study on the Baxter Road area, and so that is what it is. And so it does outline steps to move forward with that. And the mission was refined and agreed to by all parties as the Baxter Road long-term planning project will create a community-supported, actionable roadmap to implement short and long-term solutions for the Baxter Road area that help the community respond to rising seas and eroding coastlines through adaptation practices such as protection, accommodations, shoreline realignment, or no action. So that mission was accomplished and all those items were discussed with the teams. So here is an answer to where does Baxter Road fit in the overall coastal resilience plan. The Baxter Road, as you can see on the second part of this slide, is part of the second area of priorities, and the relocation has it highlighted by 2030 in the overall coastal resilience plan. You can see under the first part of the slide that other recommendations include the sediment transport study is a priority in the first first grouping of the coastal resilience plan, as well as the sediment budget. So that's where they fit in. That's where Baxter Road fits in the overall coastal resilience plan. And then in regards to a lot of discussion and a lot of follow-on information that was provided in terms of the sand, we did look at a lot of the information that was provided to us, even though it wasn't meant to be a detailed analysis for the area. And our preliminary takeaway was that the additional information that was being provided, several reports suggesting downdrift impacts, indicated that the analysis was based on selective data as opposed to a more comprehensive analysis. So the more comprehensive analysis would incorporate changes in beach position which occur on multiple time scales from hours to decades with significant variability over those time frames. And as such, a more comprehensive review is more likely to accurately capture the long-term trends. We did pull out a quote that we thought was notable from some of this review, which is that the long-term shoreline change plots are presented for continued insight into beach response. Although there is substantial variability, no post-geotube changes have yet been observed that deviate substantially from past observations. The present shoreline is at a similar location as more than approximately 10 years ago at many profiles, and no significant accelerated erosion has been noted. So that was from the Woods Hole Group in 2021. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kate. She's going to address as well the rest of those observations that we noted from the September 14th meeting, as well as give you an overview of the findings and the contents of our report.
Excellent. So for those who may not have read the entire summary of findings, just wanted to kind of introduce to the layout and what's included. We talk about the goals and scope, as Jen just went over, coordination with the CRP, which we have added some of those statements and a little bit of information about where that fits in, where Baxter Road fits in among the CRP projects to the final memo. We talk a little bit about our review of existing information, go over the stakeholder engagement process, then get into the alternatives and how they were chosen, what they are, how they were evaluated, what the considerations around them were, provide some costs, and talk about best management practices for homeowners. And then the report dives into adaptation pathways and the recommended action plan. So there were a number of alternatives looked at, 5 of them, as many of you know, but for those listening in for the first time, they included maintenance of the existing tow protection with nourishment, and the option to use adaptive nourishment was one of the alternatives explored. I should note that the adaptation alternatives that try to slow the erosion of the bluff, we looked at a number of things, but at the end of the day, those that are feasible in this unique area are only those that would really provide some sort of tow protection. There's a range of things you can use for toe protection, but those that are permittable in Massachusetts with what's on the beach and where we are. These were some of those. We did rely on the fact that the existing system has previously been permitted. So looked at expansion of the system along shore and also potentially addition of nearshore breakwaters as something that could potentially help reduce wave action in the area and help with buildup and beach nourishment of sand. And then the blue, so that's all in the orange. A couple things to note here are that really removal of the existing system, we are recommending against removal of that until a comprehensive retreat plan is in place. If for some reason that system gets removed, there should be emergency interim measures installed, which could be sand dunes, reinforcing with either sand fencing or planting, but they will not provide the equivalent level of protection as the existing system. In the yellow, we had some questions about monitoring and maintenance triggers. Really, monitoring and maintenance of the existing system should continue until such time as it is removed. So all of these adaptation alternatives that include toe protection assume that the system will be maintained and monitored in compliance with whatever permit is issued, and the jurisdicting body issuing that permit will be in charge of what those are and how that compliance works and how enforcement works. The blue items are really the recommended short-term actions related to planning around retreat, and ultimately retreat will be the long-term plan for this area. Part of it is public retreat, meaning the road and utility need to be relocated, and part of it is private properties that must be planning for retreat. And eventually getting to the pink part, which is beginning to really construct and move that road, and then relocating everything away from the bluff and removal of whatever protection is in place. The recommended action plan, we have added some immediate next steps for that retreat planning, really called out what should be happening in terms of the road relocation, which includes continued public education and outreach to gain consensus on the funding needed to move that road and utilities, and appropriating dedicated funding. We suggest perhaps 2 to 4 million to begin the work to solidify your utility and road relocation route. The routes that are presented in the draft and final report on those maps, those are not finalized. They're just a concept. So this is still a concept level plan. And then proceeding with field surveys and discussions with homeowners on that possible routing. So there's work to be done, just laid out something that could be potentially work. I'm not going to read through all the short-term and midterm and long-term actions. They're in the packet, but just wanted to kind of present them here again. There's a lot of things that can be going on in the short term in terms of planning out that road relocation and really planning for retreat and getting the things lined up before removing the existing toe protection and really kind of making sure that people can get away from the bluff before pulling that out. And with that, I think we'll take, oh, sorry, we have some next steps, sorry. And that's mostly just to say that the final memo has been delivered. Our scope of work, as Jen said, is complete. Our engagement budget and budget for this project are pretty well spent. So just wanted to reiterate that that is the case, and we can discuss next steps in terms of Arcadis. But really for Nantucket, we want to see folks think about implementing the recommended action plan, and that is a decision that will come down to the select board. And then implementing the recommendations of the coastal resilience plan, and doing both of those things should be helpful.
Yeah, I would just add that the term of our contract, it expires October 31st.
Yes. And I think we're done now.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Jen and Vincent. So what would the board like to, any initial comments from board members? If we can take down the shared screen, thank you.
Yeah.
We have Jen and Kate here to answer any of our questions. We have time to discuss this. We can go as far as making suggestions how you want to move forward. Any discussion points? I will be taking public comment once the board gets to muse around a little bit. Go ahead, Matt.
No, I think the report is great. I think the work is great, and I thank you for it. I think the part that we're going to, that we are, we and staff are going to be charged with is how do we get the work done? How do we prioritize the millions of dollars, and who's going to pay for it? That isn't outlined here, and it wasn't in their scope. So it wasn't, I'm not saying they didn't do that, but that's another step that we're going to have to put in place between now and when we start implementing this. So I just think that's, we live in the world of the possible, the possible. We live in reality, and the reality is we're going to have to figure out a way to, to pay for this and get it done. And we have some constraints on that, and there's going to be, it's not going to be easy. So that's it for now.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, Matt, the report did include a section on the project cost recoveries, and there is no magic bullet.
Yeah, no, and I understand that, but it's sort of saying you can better it and you can do this and you can do that. But having dealt with that, with sewers and things, it's easy to write a paragraph or two, no offense, on a piece of paper and make it look good. It's another for us as a town and as the elected officials to deal with the public in the various interests and finally get them to agree to it, and find something that's fair and equitable that everyone agrees to. And so I'm just laying that out because I think it's important for all of us to realize that that's going to be, along with everything else you've outlined, which we need to do, sediment budget and everything else, we have to do this. So.
Thank you, Matt. Any other comments for board members? Questions? Melissa?
Thanks so much, Jason, and thank you both very much. I appreciate all the work and attention that went into this, and I think it became really clear that there are a lot of passionate feelings on every side of this. So it's a really complex issue, and we thank you for your consideration of everyone's viewpoints. I just want to ask you, in the detailed report, you talked about the extension of the geotubes. You did consider that, but it didn't make it into the recommendation. Could you talk to us a little bit more about why that was not included? Thank you.
Yes, so it's considered, it's not that it's completely not feasible, but feasibility and what we were asked to assess in terms of feasibility, we believe that feasibility includes permittability. So the ability to be permitted and to stay in compliance with that permit. So stakeholder feedback around compliance, around sand, around permittability in the present day, where we are today, really drove kind of that decision. Certainly the geotubes, from our perspective, seem to be working to do their job where they are, and they are feasible. They were permitted at one point, but there are a lot of questions around maintaining them, and if they could be permitted, the expansion could be permitted. So that's kind of why that didn't become the #1 recommendation.
Thank you, Kate. Is there a follow-up, Melissa, or anything else? Or I go to the public? Okay, we'll go to the public and then we can come back here as we have one more time to think about it. We'll go to Mary Longacre.
Thank you, Jason. I'm speaking as the chair of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. Because the Coastal Resilience Plan was mentioned in this presentation, I just wanted to let people know that there was a presentation by Arcadis of the draft Coastal Resilience Plan on September 28th and a follow-up discussion on October 5th. And recordings of those meetings of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee are available on the town's website, on the town's YouTube channel. And you can also download the draft CRP from the town's project page on its website. So for those looking for the context of how the Sconset Bluff project fits into the Coastal Resilience Plan, or how other parts of the island might be treated under the Coastal Resilience Plan, I would recommend taking a look at those documents and those recordings. The comment period for the Coastal Resilience Plan is open until Monday, October 11th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Go to Emily Molden next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Emily Molden for the Nantucket Land Council. The Land Council participated in the feasibility study process as a stakeholder and certainly appreciated the opportunity to discuss these ongoing concerns with the Arcadis team and other stakeholder groups. Our consultant, who participated with us on behalf of the Land Council, also provided some written comments on the draft recommendations. Unfortunately, we're not able to get them submitted in time for Arcadis's consideration when they developed this final memo for you, but I do believe that all the select board members have received a copy so far. These comments really focus on a few important points that I just wanted to briefly raise at the meeting. One of the most critical aspects of evaluating any engineering solutions along the shoreline is the coincident acknowledgement of the potential impacts that they may have to adjacent or downdrift properties and the surrounding environment if they're not properly mitigated. I have heard it opined that the scope of this particular study didn't necessarily include an evaluation of the sand requirements in the form of mitigation. But even if it was not technically part of the scope, I just want to really stress the importance for the select board in considering that to the greatest extent possible. The coastal engineering alternatives really cannot be evaluated in a vacuum without consideration of mitigation. And without that necessary mitigation, hard engineering structures can never truly be considered successful or effective. Even if some properties benefit, you are pretty much guaranteed to be negatively impacting others. We also cannot caution the town enough about the potential negative effects of the adaptive mitigation strategy option. This was really assessed in the report, primarily using operational costs as a standard. And again, it didn't consider really what the long-term resulting decrease in mitigation would do. Our consultant also provided a suggestion and an example of how the life cycle costs of these alternatives should be compared when considering what the financial implications that these alternatives would have for the town would be. The life cycle costs must also include looking at the costs for this mitigation sand for the proposed or expected service life of any of these engineering alternatives. And when the mitigation volumes are included long-term for these life cycles, the retreat and relocation quickly becomes the cheaper long-term solution. It's clear that relocating Baxter Road, as was mentioned in the presentation, and a long-term retreat plan needs to become a shorter-term priority. The final memo states that all of the adaptation pathways eventually lead to strategic retreat. However, the retreat has to be carefully planned and planning must begin now. But in the meantime, I just really wanted to request and urge the select board that as you move forward with any other new proposals or plans for erosion control out there, that as a board, you do finally step in and step up as the property owner to require that any alternative or solutions that are implemented maintain compliance with the conditions that you and your regulatory boards place on them. And if not, that you also pursue appropriate enforcement. The select board, the town as a property owner, needs to acknowledge responsibility for the impacts that these structures have on other critical coastal resources and other residents. And you certainly don't want your legacy as a board on behalf of the town to include allowing projects on town land that may benefit one property at the expense of another. So there are obviously a lot of challenging decisions ahead of us as a community, but as was mentioned, there are also a lot of really passionate and interested stakeholders. A lot of information is being gathered and planning has already begun. And I hope that you take these comments and concerns into consideration as you all move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Any comments from the board? Matt?
No, I read land council comments. I think a lot of them were very good today. I think, again, they have the cost down, but it's the cost to who? That, sort of that is partly what's missing. And so it's one thing to say it's going to cost X, but is the town paying it? Is the taxpayers? Are the individuals paying it? That needs to be actually spreadsheeted out, because that's part of what we're dealing with. And then we have to also look at what is the cost of something that's cooperative and what is the cost of something that is adversarial. And so though, so I think I look at this and I say, long term, I think we all are in agreement retreat is going to be necessary. I think, and that we need to enforce the rules and make sure the right amount of sand is going on there so no one else is harmed. I think that's, sort of, and that's a huge step. That's something that maybe wasn't agreed upon a number of years ago, but I think that is agreed upon. I think what we're missing, where people are sort of not talking past isn't the right word, but where people are in disagreement is timing and how quickly. Some people want it done, tomorrow or by next year, which is very unrealistic and not going to happen. And some people, think it'll last 50 years, which I could say the same thing about. So somewhere in between, is where we're going to have to fall, I think, as a board, to do this fairly and well. And so I caution everybody that we can't, it's not going to happen overnight. There's so much stuff there, but I think tightening up some of the rules and regulations and, some of those things certainly have to be tightened up, but we also have to be realistic about what we can get done and when. So.
Thank you, Matt. Melissa?
Thanks, Jason, and thanks for those comments, Matt. I agree with you. I guess, I wonder for us in our consideration of this report, how we move forward in terms of next step planning, because it does seem like we're going to have two parallel paths that we're going to have to be pursuing at the same time. And one of those is the undertaking of the study of the relocation of the road. So I'm curious, how we weave that into our priorities, how we make that happen, and what our plan is for that conversation at the same time as our concurrent plan of the existing geotubes and possible expansion of those. So I think that's what I was looking forward to discussing tonight, was how do we pursue both paths simultaneously.
Melissa, would you like answers or conversation from other board members, at least their ideas on that? Is that what you're?
Sure, I think so. I mean, it's a bit of a rhetorical question in some sense, but I think that it's clear that this has to rise to a significant level of priority for us to begin work on. And that the existing structure, or even the expansion of a structure, is not something that we can rely on. And we understand the complexities of relocation are going to take a lot of time and resources. So as a board, I think we have to be clear with town administration in terms of where this lands in our order of priorities, and how and what we expect in terms of progress on that. And I'd love to hear some conversation about how we see that rolling out.
Matt?
I think I'm hesitant. I think I know there's a path, but I'm somewhat hesitant to really lay into it, because I think that it's some of what we have to discuss and have to sort of weigh and consider is leading to litigation, is leading to, leading down some paths that we haven't fully sort of understood. I mean, I can guess what they'll be, but I don't think we understand those. And so, I think we've got to be a little careful. But B, what I would say is I think that we should be, I think we've got to find a way to do this cooperatively. I think we've got to find a way to keep to work toward this cooperatively. I think we've got to find a way to hold SBPF accountable, now and into the future. I think we've got to find a way to stop the threats that they're making to us, and at the same, to the town or to us, and handing the keys back. I think whatever we draw up has to do that. I think whatever we draw up has to correct some of the problems that we've had previously. We thought we had alternative access, but it was, I'll just use this as one example. That we had alternative access, but it was what is it? Jumping. Give me the word, Jason. It's not jumping.
Springing easements?
Springing. There we go. There's the word. It was springing easement, but it was to the individual, and one of the individuals sold. So we're back at the table on that. And so I think there are different aspects of this that, that's just one example. So we have to find a way to navigate those. I think that, and I think the work group that we had, one of the recommendations came out was finding a sand source, and SBPF was able and willing to take that on. It was in their best interest because they need it, but they would be selling the town sand at cost. The town's responsibility was going to be finding sites to put the sand. And part of the goal was to have the sand slurried to those sites, and then, so close enough to where it's going to be needed, whether it be Baxter Road, Sconset proper, the airport, there's going to be, or the sewer beds, Ames Ave, have places to put the sand once it's found, that it could be slurried and not require barges and thousands of trucks. And, I think that's a huge value, and something that we, along with these other recommendations, should be working on. And so I think, so we have to balance, as a board, and the staff have to balance all those various aspects and find something that will benefit the town long term. I think one of the things that we will have, here's another aspect out there that we should be thinking about. Right now, we have a walkable beach and access. We have, we have the road and access. Whatever we draw up should, when we abandon the road, typically those go to the homeowners on either side, and they could say no. But we have to work with the homeowners and say, no, when we abandon the road, it will still be a path. And the houses closest to the water will disappear, and we'll have a bluff path. And then eventually, eventually that will go, and we'll have the back road will become the access. Because we want to continue to have access along the shoreline. That's our heritage. That's how we've always done it. So that's another sort of principle that, in my mind, needs to be included in these negotiations, included in, whatever planning we do here or elsewhere. So I'm not sure. I'm not. And so to do that, I think we can't draw a hard line and say expand the geotubes to the full thing they asked, and or we can't say get rid of them tomorrow. I think it means that we have to expand them slightly, like the work group recommended, tighten up the conditions that are have Concom tighten up the conditions, and we tighten up our conditions that we had in ours regarding things like easements and, here's a good example. We've got already received a letter or two from homeowners out there saying, well, hey, if you don't support us, you're going to have to take our property for the road. And we're not, we're not going to let you take our property. We're going to fight you and we're going to make you pay us for the whole property. So we've already got a couple of those letters, which I think are sort of, what we're doing is trying to work this out for everybody. And I think those types of sort of threatening letters are inappropriate. I think that there should be a hold harmless to the town in this situation. If we're spending millions and millions of dollars and thousands of hours of staff time and working with the citizens in any neighborhood, the citizens should be working back. They shouldn't be opposing us putting a new road in for them. That shouldn't be happening. And so those are the things that, I think that as principals, that's the stuff that we need to get into place. And not, so I could go on longer, but I'll let you guys, that's enough.
Thank you, Matt. While we're stewing on that, we'll go to public comment. Barbara Bunn.
Okay, am I now unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I have to tell you, I'm sitting here feeling as if I just fell down a rabbit hole. I listened to Vince and to the Arcadis people tell us that the project goal was to get consensus and that it had been achieved. I'm sorry, but I haven't heard consensus. And I just don't know what to make of that. We had been told by Matt and others, town council, that they wanted to wait for the final Arcadis report. And then all of a sudden we have an agreement that was negotiated behind closed doors before the final report comes in. And I'm flabbergasted. I mean, I'm having trouble putting together coherent sentences at this. This makes no sense. And I also want to raise one other issue. If you read what is being said, for example, in the press, there are people misrepresenting what is in the Arcadis reports. And, Matt, threatening is not good. Misrepresenting is not good. And I don't know how that gets us to community. It just, I think I fell down a rabbit hole. Thank you.
Barbara. Can we go to Mr. Spruce for bulkhead?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question, if Arcadis is still with us. I've heard the board members mention expansion, and I don't remember seeing anything in the report that says they recommended expansion of the geotubes. Could we get a clarification, please, Mr. Chairman?
Sure, thank you. Kate or Jen?
Sure. Expansion is a considered adaptive alternative that was looked at. And we make the statement that if effectiveness were the only criterion, expansion would be our recommendation. But we were asked to look at feasibility overall all of each alternative. And so for the reasons I kind of explained earlier, right, that we heard all the stakeholders talking about sand and compliance. We understand the current regulatory landscape, and it may not be possible right now. So it's not the top recommendation. It's not to say that it couldn't happen, but for right now, it's not the recommended pathway in our memo.
Thank you, Kate. And thank you, Kate and Jennifer, for sticking around. I know there'd be some more questions for us. We're at to process all this. Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick comment. A goal was a consensus. There isn't consensus. There isn't a written agreement yet, other than but so some of the things that are incorrect is talking about behind closed doors, and this is written in stone and et cetera. We've got an agreement to move forward. We haven't got the agreement. We haven't got the details. The devil's in the details. And some of the things that I talked about are huge benefits to the town that I think should be considered. So that's where, and I think, I think there's some misrepresentation, from both sides on this at times. And so that's enough.
Thank you, Matt. I know we've been in conversation with all parties since, is it May of 2020? Matt, you kind of took the lead on that, speaking with SUPF and then Concom and all the different parties trying to have some of these discussions. So some of these outcomes today have been, and many more have been talked about. So I just want to throw that out there, that there was no secret behind closed doors, conspiracy here. This has been talked about for a year and a half, how to try to move forward. Dawn, did you have your hand up?
Matt has said a lot about, I think, what we've all discussed. But I just wanted to add that this just becomes even more important right now, as we're facing the total coastal resiliency plan and some ideas of how to work with property owners and protect the public infrastructure and long-term, and figuring out long-term planning, funding, so forth. So I think that we're just, I agree with Matt that there's got to be significant details to move any of this forward. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring the parties together and not just be an endless litigation where nothing moves forward.
Thank you, Dawn. And go back to what Melissa said. There's two paths here, two parallel paths of the existing projects and protecting the bluff or not, and then relocating the road. And I know town admin and Libby, they're wanting to know, from the select board, when it comes to the road, when do you want us to do this? How do you want us to do this? Who's going to own it? That type of stuff. So you're right, Melissa. There's two things going on here. They are connected, but they're different. They're parallel paths. Thank you for framing it that way. Any other comment, Matt?
Yeah, but it's not a false dilemma. It's not either or.
Right.
We've got to be doing a bit of both. Mm-hmm. So I think that's, and I've been involved with this longer than all of you guys. In some ways, I wish I wasn't. The easiest thing, 10 years ago would have just vote no and let this go to litigation and have it all fought in the courts and then have it fought again. But really we've, the only winners there are the lawyers. And we'd still be spinning our wheels. And so I think that we're trying to find some, like Don said, we're trying to find a path and a blueprint for how we're going to do this in other parts of the island, and how we're going to work with people, and how we're going to, assign the cost fairly and all those issues. And I think we've got to, and I don't think that is necessary. That is difficult to do through the, to litigate. You can't, that's hard to litigate, litigate and end up in a positive place. If you're in business and you're dealing with it, if you've gotten to that point, you really shouldn't be you can't be partnered with someone who you're litigating. You just have to find. So anyway, we've got to find a way through this all the way around the island.
Thank you, Matt. Comments on the board? We go to the public. Can we go to Rick Atherton?
Wait, should I just sit on mute? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead, Rick.
just a quick sort of observation. And I may have misunderstood what I read in the press, but it seemed to me about a week ago, there was an announcement that the select board had entered into an agreement with SBPF, and you caused their suit, or you agreed to its dismissal. And it sounded like there was a written agreement that helped move that forward. In order to be transparent, so we all understand what's happening, I would hope you would make those documents available to the public sooner, like tomorrow, and make them clear. It seemed to me that you were agreeing in those documents, or at least that was the press implication, that you were in favor of the expansion. And if that's not the case, then you need to say so. But those documents, as long as they're not available, we're all going to speculate. And that's not in your interest or in any member of the Nantucket community's interest. Thanks for the opportunity to speak, Jason.
Thank you, Rick. Libby?
Yes, I have had this question a couple of times myself. There is nothing in the statement that was issued that says an agreement has been reached between the town and SBPF. It says, quote, SBPF has agreed to dismiss the current case in Superior Court that challenges the Conservation Commission's denial of the 2018 expansion plan, et cetera. There is no written agreement. There is no secret meeting. There is no nefarious whatever, as has been suggested in various areas. If there was a written agreement, we would put it out there. There is a written working group report that contained findings, I guess I would call them, and recommendations from a group that was put together over a year ago of select board members, town administration members, conservation commission members, and SBPF. And that is readily available. I would be happy to provide anybody a copy of that. It may even be on the town website. If there's any agreement, it, I guess, might be that as something that the select board discussed and generally accepted. It went to the Conservation Commission, and my recollection is that the Concoms pretty much said, we're not going to be able to consider these recommendations unless we have an application to review. So fast forward to now, pretty soon, they will have an application to review.
Thank you, Libby. Any other comments from board members? Okay, could we go to public? Deanne Atherton?
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Deanne.
So understanding, could you turn that sound down? Understanding what the town manager just said, the select board, the town, and SBPF are going to proceed to file a joint application for the expansion of the geotubes. Is that correct?
If I'm supposed to be answering that, I think the answer is we agreed to work together on a joint application. Oh, Matt.
Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that we may, if the conditions are right, if what we, and some of it came out of the work group and some of it is stuff that we've learned since, if those are agreed upon, we might. That's how I would answer it. I would say we're still in we aren't in negotiations now, but we will be in negotiations when we sit down to do that. So, staff or us sit down to do that. So yeah, I would say we might.
And again, reading from the statement,
go ahead, Libby.
Together, we plan to bring a formal proposal to the select board in coming weeks for consideration, and are confident that there's a timely and effective way to improve the existing project, et cetera, et cetera. So the idea is that we would work to develop a new joint application for the project's expansion subject to the review and approval of the select board, as well as insights of the Arcadis report, concerns and comments during Concom hearings, and recommendations of the work group, as I mentioned previously, that was assembled by the board last summer and the report issued last fall.
Dan, do you have anything else? I think
Yes, Jason, so just as a point of clarification, expansion of the geotubes is not ruled out.
For me, it's not ruled out. That's why but we don't know for just what Libby and Matt said. We might go into something, because I think what we've always heard was the Conservation Commission cannot think about anything else besides what's in front of them, and what's in front of them is not working. Right? They denied that. So, is there something else that could come to them that could work?
Jason, let me just respond to that, and I'm speaking very personally. I have been a part of stakeholders who have put good faith in this Arcadis project that you initiated back in January for $150,000. We have attended stakeholder meetings. We have submitted documents for the registry. We have written copious comments. We have tried to participate in the process in good faith, and we have been assured time and time again, assured that the process had integrity. And what I understand is that the select board made an agreement or came to some understanding with SBPF before the report was even finalized to pursue a number of options, including expansion, which is specifically not recommended in the report.
Well, I would disagree with you on that last part, Deanne, because it kind of is recommended if the political and the, what did you say, Kate, the permittable, it's not really permittable in this climate. If all that was taken away, they would suggest that. So I think I mean, Arcadis, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Kate, you kind of came in the middle there. Like, yes, we would suggest it, but not because of these couple things.
I think ultimately we've always said it's going to be up to Conservation Commission, right? So if the application meets the criteria, if they interpret the permittability for something to be permittable, and if maintenance and compliance are going to be maintained, then it may be feasible, and that's what we were asked to look at, feasibility.
Sorry, Deanne, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Thank you, Jason, and I'll wind this up. I mean, the regulatory concerns are serious concerns. Our Conservation Commission met months considering an application for expansion and denied it. It was appealed by SBPF to Superior Court. That appeal entailed only an administrative review of the record. Any attorney who has looked at that was confident, almost 80%, that Superior Court would uphold the decision of the Conservation Commission. All that had to be found was that they decided in an arbitrary and capricious fashion. That has been delayed and delayed and delayed. And by whatever agreement you made in executive session, we do not know. That suit was withdrawn at the 11th hour, and it would have been in the best interest of this community to have Superior Court review that administrative record, and find in support of the Concom or not. You, by your intervention, you prohibited that from happening.
Thank you, Deanne. Is there anything else? Okay. Any board members, any comments? I think we probably want to wrap this up here in a couple minutes, as we have more things on our agenda. I don't think we're going to solve this tonight. That's why I opened up with the beginning. We might need another agenda item to talk about those two parallel paths and spend more time on the Baxter Road relocation and everything that that entails. Kate and Jennifer, anything else you'd like to say or ask or wave goodbye or?
Thank
We're very
you.
appreciative of your time and everybody's efforts and participating.
Yeah.
And we know we didn't reach consensus and it was a challenge and fully admitted that, but hopefully it was helpful to you all.
We did try hard, but no.
Thank you. Vincent?
Thank you very much, Jason. Just in terms of concluding this report, would you like to leave us, say, a 1-week comment period and then take it from there, or do you consider this report concluded now?
I haven't thought about that. That's it. Do you have any recommendations? I mean, I'm not sure what I'm happy to have a 1-week comment period.
This came from the board. It's at the pleasure of the board.
Board members, any thoughts? Yeah, a 1-week comment period would be great. A lot of things have happened in the last couple of weeks, so that makes sense. I'm seeing board members shaking their head yes. Yep, that'd be great. Okay, more of this will be coming in a future agenda. Any last comments from the board? Okay, thank you, Kate. Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Vincent, and everybody else who put time into this effort.
Good night.
Yeah, and I'll make one quick comment. I think some consensus was reached. You know, I think that looking at it, and I thank you guys for that. I think there's something that we will, you know, I think that we will be, you know, retreating at some point. And I think, you know, there was the consensus around some of that, which I think was, you know, was not there before. And you brought up a lot of, you know, not a lot of things. We brought up some things that we hadn't considered that should be included. So I think there's a lot of positive that does come out of this. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt. Matt, was that you ending on a positive note right there? I'm going to mark my calendar.
Sorry.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to head over. Thank you, Arcadis. We're going to head over to consent items. Gift acceptance for fire department and our Island home. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, my internet is completely in and out.
Okay, all those in favor? This will be with a letter of thanks also sent. Melissa Murphy.
Aye.
Don Holgate. Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
Jason Bridges, aye. I think Don is frozen, so that's going to have to technically pass 4-0.
Aye.
Oh, there we are, 5-0. Froze there for a second. Citizen Department request. The first one is from the Finance Department. Request for approval of sale of general obligation bonds in the amount of $20,312,200. There was an edit made recently, made up of $15,977,500 in general obligation bonds and debt refunding in the amount of, this is a new number, $4,334,700. I get that right, Brian?
You did. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just take you briefly through this one and then the band sale because they were all combined in the same vote by bond council.
Okay.
So as the chair indicated, we recently sold $20,312,200 worth of general obligation bonds. I do want to point out that for this sale, there were 13 bids, which we were extremely pleased with. The winning bidder was Raymond James and Associates with a true interest cost of 1.0626, which according to Hilltop was even a little bit better than they expected, given the uncertainty in the climate that we're in right now. One thing I would point out is the refunding will save the water company and the airport over the remaining 10 years of the debt that we refunded, approximately just under $700,000. So it was a very successful refunding that we were able to take advantage of within this debt sale. Mr. Chair, if it's okay with you, I'll just go through the band sale at the same time because it is all part of the same vote, if that's okay with you. So on the same date of last week, Thursday, September 30th, we sold $35,818,400 in general obligation bond anticipation notes. They were made up of two series, and they were made up of two series because the first series, which is known as Series A, in the amount of $26,818,400, has been taken out for a full year. That is mainly made up of town projects, primarily infrastructure-related projects and related to sidewalks and other projects that have been previously approved. Majority of it is also with respect to sewer and all of the projects that they have ongoing. We rolled a lot of the affordable housing projects money that we had borrowed because we're just not ready to permanently borrow that quite yet. And then Series B was made up of $9 million, and that's strictly airport projects, which, because we anticipate grant funding to be received for those within the next 6 to 7 months, we only took those to June. So that's why we broke this into two series. These didn't generate quite as much interest as the general obligation bonds did. We only received 3 bonds for the Series A. Series B received 7 bids, most likely because of the short duration in it. We still did very well in terms of what our net interest costs were. In Series A, it was 0.146. And in Series B, it was 0.1163. So overall, we're very pleased with the sale, and we continue to perform very well when we go to market. So we would recommend approval of the sale of the general obligation bonds and the bond anticipation notes.
Okay. Is there any questions or a motion? Do we need to state this motion in a certain way? There's Erica.
So if somebody could just please move to approve the sale of the bonds and bands pursuant to the vote that's in your packet dated October 6, 2021.
So moved. I'll second.
All those in favor by roll call: Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Don Holgate,
Aye.
Jason Bridges, aye. Thank you, Brian. That passes 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Going to move to a public hearing that's continued from July 14th. This is to consider amending the Chapter 250 Harbor and Town Pier Regulations, to be known as Chapter 278 Harbor and Waterways. Okay. Sheila, are you walking us through there? Libby, are you?
I can give you a little introduction, although the harbor master and the deputy chief could probably do so as well. I admit I have not been tracking this day to day, word by word, minute by minute. But the last time the board took this up, it was generally agreed that there were sufficient concerns to put together a kind of a stakeholder meeting, which Don Holgate basically helped us with and facilitated. And so Don, actually, maybe you might want to take us through. Sorry, Don. And some, as a result, though, I think some feedback has been provided and there are some policy decisions to be made by the board, but I am not quite sure who to turn it to. Don, maybe you start it.
I can try. Hopefully my internet cooperates. I think that most of the concerns that were discussed have already been incorporated. The big decision point that I felt that we still had was the slips, and whether we want some of them to be permanent or whether we want to kind of keep the lottery the way it is. And after hearing from so many people, I think that it was either keep it the way it is was more of the consensus, or if we did go to half permanent slips, to make sure that the people who get those slips have to surrender their mooring. And that there were some complications in sort of how that works in my mind, but maybe Sheila or Charlie have some other input.
Well, I think that pretty much what we heard at that stakeholders meeting was that everybody just wanted to keep the lottery the way it is now. I don't think, we didn't really hear anybody saying that nobody was really commenting about the permanent slips. They were more concerned about losing their moorings, and that they just wanted to keep the lottery the way it was, with the exception of only one entry per boat registration. Everybody was in agreement on that, they would like that changed. So that's pretty much it. Everything else, I think everybody was pretty much agreement on, with the liveaboards, the Airbnb and the other changes, the dinghy permits. We didn't hear any comments about too many about that, other than the 10-foot. A couple people were concerned about the size, but all in all, I think at that stakeholder meeting, everybody pretty much agreed with what we have with keeping the lottery the same.
Thank you, Sheila. Any other comments? Charlie?
No, I can just say that the current draft you have in front of you incorporates leaving the slip lottery as is, no changes other than a few wording changes that for housekeeping purposes, but the gist is all the same of the A and B recreationals. We still have the A and B commercials. The commercial A's were all still permanent. That didn't change. And then the commercial B's are the annual lotteries. So that all that has stayed the same.
Thank you. Are we okay if I go to the public? This is a public hearing. We're okay. We go to, John O'Connor had his hand up and it's gone. I'll wait a second. Oh, there it is.
Am I here?
Yep, go ahead, John. We can hear you.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad that we're not considering permanent slips, because I was here 25 years ago when we changed it. But I have a suggestion that I think makes sense. 1 year isn't a lot of time. I was suggesting that we do it sort of like what the House of Representatives do. We would have 3-year leases, and every year 30 of them would be up for the lottery. So you would have a chance to get in every year for those 30, and you would have a little more stability with your boat by knowing that you're tied up for 3 years. My suggestion, anything except permanent.
Thank you, John. Any thoughts on that, Sheila? Or
right now, half of the slips right now are on a 2-year lease, and the other half are on the 1 year. So we do have sort of a hybrid for some stability.
And some of the people on the 1 year don't want to pay the extra money to get the 2 year. They like just paying the fee for the 1 year lease, is pretty much what we heard at that meeting.
Dawn, go ahead.
Well, you would have to close the public hearing, but I'd be ready to make a motion.
Okay. Is there any other comments in the public before we close this? Want to give everybody another chance to ask a question or put a comment in? Let's wait 1 second for that. Oh, there we go. We go to Tom.
Hi, I'm a member of SHAB, and I just want to comment that we would support this. Originally, we tried to make some changes from the permanent recommendation to try to work with the harbor master on it to get some of what they wanted, but we have no problem with keeping the lottery as it is.
Thank you, Tom. So what's in our packet, if we motion to approve that, the lottery stays the same, right? Just to be clear.
Except for the number of entries.
Okay, Erica?
Just gonna know, we updated the packet today, so it's what in your packet right now as of today.
Okay.
And one thing, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
as part of the recommendation to take the fees out of the regulation, there's a separate fee schedule, which is an appendix to the regulation. That was a recommendation from General Code. So if there is a vote, there needs to be 2 votes, one to adopt the regulations and then one to adopt the appendix of fees, which the fees haven't changed. We're just putting them in an outside section.
Okay. Board members, how do you feel about the, Don's ready to go to a vote. Does everybody feel okay with what was in our packet? Go to a vote. Okay. Matt?
Yeah, before we do, I just, the dinghy permits, I'm fine with it all. The only question one of the things I would just, and it isn't in this, but we talk about people have to, what we're saying is people have to live on the, be on the boat if they're going to be sort of using it as a, as a place to live. One of the things that I would, at some point, I would like to think that we'd have dye tablets in the holds, if we don't already. So if people are living on the boat and they, and they don't bother getting pumped out, we can catch them and do something about it. I just saw that comment I think tightening it up so that we don't have a bunch of Airbnbs in the harbor is very smart. And I'm glad we're doing that. And I hope we go, a little further on some of those.
We do have dye tabs.
All right, then I'm good.
We have a bunch.
And is it required then?
Yes, sir. Yep.
All right, good.
Okay, any last public comment before I close the public hearing? Just want to make sure everybody's got a chance. Okay, we'll close the public hearing. And is there a motion or any other discussion?
So moved. Actually, there's 2 motions. I move approval of it and I move separating the fees.
Okay, we do that all together, Erica? Or
I think yes, as long as they're noted. So motion to approve the amended regulations as well as the schedule of fees.
that's your motion, Matt?
Yes.
Okay. Did you second that, Dawn? Was there a second? Okay, second. Okay. All those in favor by roll call, Melissa Murphy?
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella?
Aye.
Don Holgate?
Aye.
Matt Fee?
Aye.
Jason Bridges, aye. That passes 5-0. Wanted to thank Deputy Gibson, the Harbor Master, Lucy, Don, everybody who put time into this. I know it was a long process and we waited and we went back and we listened more. So I appreciate that that everybody did that. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Okay, town manager's report. Is there anything, Libby?
I'm sorry, no, too many things going on to get something.
Okay, no, just want to double check. Select Board's report comments. We have the review determination as to outdoor dining parameters. Hi, Amy.
Hi, how are you?
Great.
Great. So outdoor dining. We are going to tonight just go over a quick overview to go over where we are, what the next steps are, and some direction that would be needed from the board. So first, I'll just go what our current status is. We go to the next there. Thank you. Through the state, where we are now, obviously we're no longer in a state of emergency. However, the legislature did extend local authority over these spaces until April the 1st of 2022, which also is when seasonal licenses start up again. So it just gives the local municipality the ability to make these decisions and extend outdoor dining. Locally, through the select board, the current permits that are out there are valid until the end of December or as further amended by the select board. If we have any weather issues or anything else comes up right now, all those approvals were on a single season, non-precedent setting basis. Okay, next slide. Thank you. So what we are doing now is I split this into different categories so we can kind of tackle this way. the categories are the private property locations. This includes all those extended spaces that were in parking lots, lawns, different patios, privately owned spaces that include downtown locations such as locations on Straight Wharf, South Wharf. Those are privately owned properties, publicly accessed but privately owned. So they would be going under the usual alteration of premises process. What we're doing currently is reviewing. We will review those that want to continue with some of those spaces and expand it, as far as any special permits, the normal course that some of these things would take, parking requirements for those things out of town, things of that sort. So what we're going to do is really kind of determine who is looking to keep or extend these spaces and work with them on that process. And then ultimately, those that do and go through planning board, if needed, will come to the select board with a normal alteration of premises application. So that is taken care of itself. No action is needed by the select board at this time. We'll move into the public property spaces. I'm splitting them how we're managing them into public property sidewalks, parking spaces where no street closure is required, similar to India Street or in front of Boarding House on the Pearl type spaces, and then public property, street dining, street closure required spaces. Next slide, please. So in these private property spaces, it's all establishments wishing to keep those extended spaces must apply as they would. Oh, this is private property. I already went over this. Sorry, I'm just reading. I think I've said all of this. They need to go through this process, as we said, and patio guidelines. Okay, we can move to the next slide. I think I already talked about this. Starting with public property and sidewalks. As far as select board requirements for approval of location standards to include, we're looking for approval to add seasonal sidewalk permit standards and application process for these common vicular licenses, those with alcohol and those without. The one legal motion you will need to make once we get to that point is granting authority to carry liquor across sidewalks to create a contiguous space. We need to move forward and discuss fees for sidewalk permits based on square footage and or number of seats, and approve any restricted locations as recommended by staff or public safety. What it requires from us and town departments is to develop this sidewalk restaurant patio license, which we basically have established, but really doing it for a permanent basis. Maintenance and different types of agreements. We need to work obviously more on HDC requirements so that we have specific how this should look, the type of things that would be allowed, giving them parameters in the restaurant parameters that they would need. Specifications for the area, pedestrian access requirements, and ADA and other requirements. So what I'm saying here is in sidewalks, I think this is something that we can put together as far as parameters to set up a process for the select board to review any of those that wish to continue. Next slide. And similar type of process for parking spaces. Again, what we would require to do is the same type of approval process from the select board, from our side of the table, and town departments is creating those permanent type of parameters for these locations. Obviously, during the pandemic, we allowed for things that wouldn't normally be allowed. We would certainly require more of a, lack of a better term, the appropriate look for Nantucket, HDC requirements and such, barriers, type of furniture or equipment that can be outdoors on a more permanent basis. Pedestrian access and all the same things, signage, lighting, all those types of requirements that we normally would have for a brick and mortar location. Next slide.
Amy, can I ask you there,
Yeah.
on the parking spaces, is it considered the sidewalk permitting is the same thing because they have to carry the liquor across? So that's just
correct. So the guidance from the ABCC and the state was that we would certainly get the appropriate legal language for it, but would be for the town to grant permission to cross a public sidewalk because you need a contiguous space when creating an outdoor space with a liquor license. Sorry about that. So that would just be a legal requirement that we would put into any final review.
The ABCC kind of looks at sidewalks and parking spaces the same because you have to cross a sidewalk to get to it.
Correct. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second.
That's okay. You're on the street dining.
Yes, exactly. I just wanted to say, I know what I wanted to say was about sidewalks and other spaces of that. Other towns have done this prior to COVID. I've been looking at Cambridge and talking to Cambridge because they have a separate sidewalk permit. So I've been using that kind of as a guide that they had prior to. So for these locations would have to apply for a separate sidewalk permit as part of their license seasonally. So that's been somewhat of a guide for how we're setting this up. So as we move forward into public property, street dining, now this area, the other two, I think, are something that we can internally set up what those parameters are and have a path forward. I think this is the area that obviously needs more discussion and direction. So as I've outlined here, what requires select board direction as follows. Assignment of any additional external review committees or task force type of meetings. We obviously already have the internal work group working on this, but any sort of additional review. Currently, I had a meeting with the restaurants yesterday from downtown. Additionally, meeting with visitor services, chamber, retail, and others as well to get input. Obviously looking for direction for staff to present recommended location standards and application process now, or if we determine a wider review to include things such as, do we need to consider how to replace some of these lost parking spaces, have a larger conversation regarding that, additional valet or any sort of perimeter. Should the type of street closure be allowed for special events only or longer periods during the summer or fall seasons? We can certainly dictate the length of time these permits are allowed through the ABCC said as well. If we put on any application, this is valid May to August, May to October, whatever we determine. Again, how can we expand this program, more pedestrian spaces in general downtown and include more businesses? Temporary type of events or other type of discussion. So when we got to this point, I think I felt like we needed more discussion or more direction from the board as far as how they felt about these more permanent types of closures. Now, as I say that in my meeting with those that are doing it already downtown, a good portion of them would like to continue. Very much. They've seen it as being incredibly beneficial. Certainly a lot of folks feel that it has brought a lot of life to downtown. At night, it is bringing folks down more for retail. It's also helped some retail folks. Folks are outside more and walking around more and later. And some retail shops have certainly responded to that with their hours as well. So there was a lot of discussion of that. So I expect to see a good number of them and possibly someone new applying to do so if we do allow for this program to continue in some way, even if it's just sidewalks and or parking spaces as well. But I feel that street dining is something that requires a little bit more discussion. So I think that's enough, Erica. I think we can probably take that down and have a discussion. So, take any questions, see what I can clarify.
Any thoughts? I'd be happy to start. Amy, curious about yesterday, the feedback that you got, because some individuals have said to me in some certain restaurants that they would be okay with no street dining, particularly for them. Did you feel that street dining, parking spaces, and sidewalks were all in high demand from the group that you talked to?
Well, obviously this first group is very specific to the restaurant industry and those that are involved in it. And they of course want to support all the others to have the spaces that they need. But the street closure itself, again, obviously takes greater resources, has much wider impact. And again, I want to be cognizant of other businesses and the flow of things as well. I think we can certainly allow for and set up standards for sidewalks and parking space types area, but the street closure part of it, again, when we had Oak Street, maybe less of an impact, less used and easier to do. The other one, Gaslight as well, maybe less of an impact, but still, it does have an impact. I didn't even realize we only have now one street that goes off to the right off South Water for emergency vehicles, things of that sort. So there was a greater impact than I realized. So that's why.
I just clarify. I just wanted to make sure that the restaurants wanted it. So if nobody, for example, if nobody wanted the street closings, then we could just not talk about that tonight.
Right, right.
Everybody who still was interested in doing that in future years.
Yes. And as you know, we know of maybe one or two restaurants that may have street closures that have some either staffing or the way the restaurant is set up that might make it difficult to serve that space. So there might be some logistical efforts, but as most have said, that they, unless they know it's something that we're committed to, are not going to make the investment right away, which understandable. But it was a very enthusiastic call. And I had most folks on there representing most areas that were downtown. And it's certainly something I asked them to make sure that they, help get us feedback from those that really enjoyed it, things of that sort, and to help advocate for their businesses as well in this process.
Did everyone seem interested in paying something like per seat? So for a street closure, if you have 40 seats out there, that's gonna be a significant amount of money versus 8 or 12 seats on a sidewalk, I would think.
Correct. Absolutely. And, we discussed square footage versus seats, but obviously seats is probably the fairest route to go. The first question was, hey, do we have to keep the same occupancy again, like we did during COVID? And no, this is additional seats. Obviously that was something we set up to make it fair. And because of COVID restrictions, where their occupancy stayed the same, this is a situation where they're going to add to whatever their current occupancy is. Right. So their normal restaurant is, 100. If we allow for some sidewalk seating, 10 seats, that's 10, that's separate. That's its own different occupancy. So that was just something we had established for COVID. If we do establish fees, I know, again, I'll refer to Cambridge. They have a sidewalk contract with folks. They signed for 2 seasons, and I believe it's like $750 a season or something of that sort. So they do it that way, but it's obviously a different type of town. So, but that would be the option there too. And I think seating would be the fairest way to do it.
Well, I think that's interesting that for some reason I missed that they would add to the occupancy. I thought we were still in if you got 100 and you put 20 outside, then you only have 80 in.
Right.
Now you're saying it's adding. So then you would,
correct.
I think they need to pay anyway because it's using public land, taxpayer land, but now it's adding, they're expanding. So there's a price to that. Okay. I wanted to get us going there. Matt?
Yeah, and I think that when you get into is it per seat, and the square footage, I agree. You get into is it per seat, but some places are doing great guns, and some places are not. Like some are high end, some are medium end. Sort of there's different tiers. You're buying a hamburger versus buying a $300 bottle of wine. Where there's a difference. I look at some of this. There's also a fairness issue to the people who get turned away, who want to do it but get told no. So I think the ones that get to do it are getting a huge advantage and and that should be fair and equitable. I would love to see it be a percentage of the sales that are done out there, and something along those lines. But or it's got to be high, or we've got to find a way to tier it to get enough money. Otherwise, it's not fair to the other. We've got to find a way to make it fair to the others. That's on the fees part. On the other part, I agree with Amy that sort of Oak Street looked great and was an easy, that one took, 7 spaces, et cetera, but it looked great. It served 3 restaurants. It didn't hurt traffic. Others, we can't say the same thing about, I don't think. And so that, those will be hard decisions if it's going to come from a work group, et cetera. And some of them could have looked great, but they parked cars in front of them and stuff. And so, so whatever we do has to look better in some cases than it did. If we're going to continue this, we have a, sort of, I talked about this from the beginning, is there should be some consistency, and there should be an eye toward, just sort of making it look like it fits in. And, and that there has to be some thought on that, but, so those are my comments for now.
Any other thoughts? Or Christy?
Thank you. As you guys all know, I've been a huge supporter of outdoor dining. I think Amy's right in that it has really revived our downtown, and something that the community and business owners have been looking into for a while is how to bring more families downtown. I think this has kind of been one of the solutions. I really like the idea that Amy proposed at the end of the slides about trying to figure out ways to help other businesses participate in the outdoor dining. So whether that's closing down a street for an event or a night, or finding ways that more restaurants could be using some shared spaces if they're close by, the way that Oak Street is shared by several of the restaurants. So just more of a comment that I just love the way that we're looking at this collaboration, and hopefully we can find ways to help other businesses also participate in this.
Thanks, Christy. Amy?
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and both Matt and Christy agree with a lot of those comments. And I think that is the goal. And what I'm proposing is that we further work on what the parameters and what the standards would be. Because as we move forward, it would be as they would be applying a normal course for any additional seating. This just happens to be on property that's managed by the town. So we're the property owner in this. So it would be, standards, HDC, signage, things of that sort that we normally would. So that would be my proposals, that we set those up, those parameters, to see if they can meet those as well, and work with them on that. And also, and one other thing too, is we talked about in setting this up and making sure that applications that come through, that it's a standard deadline for that prior to the season, so that everything is reviewed at the same time, that we're not one-offing alteration requirements for downtown, so that way that you can determine the full impact of whatever applications that we do receive if we determine to go down this road.
Matt, you have your hand up?
Yeah, my other comment is we have to also think about how do we handle, or the group has to think about, how do you handle takeout? How do you handle someone without seats, like the juice bar, or like some of the guys on the strip? How do you, that has to be thought through. Some of that has improved and worked really well with a takeout on the side, et cetera. It kept people from, spilling into the street. I think there was some real positives. How do we, what's a fair way to do that and make sure that it's considered and dealt with?
Yeah, Matt, I think those are separate, but it makes sense to talk about them all at the same time, right? The takeout portion, like the juice bar situations. Just to give everybody my thoughts. I'm not for any street closures. I don't think we need them, unless, Christy, you made me think of, if it's Oak Street, half of it is for the restaurants and the other half is for people to walk. Or Oak Street is open for anybody. So the sustainable Nantuckets of the world go at Oak Street, and something else goes there, retail do it. And if we're going to close it, it can be for everybody. And the lens I'm looking through is in a non-COVID world. So I don't think we need the streets, and I don't know if we need the parking spaces. But the sidewalks, I think that's a great idea to keep those as much as possible. I love the lighting at night. It looks great, and I've heard nothing but good comments from it. Matt, I hear you on the, having a $45 steak versus a $16 burger. How do you have the seat? We charge the same. I don't really know how to do that. I think we've just got to charge the same on that per seat, and people will turn the tables faster, or businesses will adapt. Those are just some of my quick thoughts. Melissa?
Thanks, Jason. I would like to see, and perhaps Amy, we can include someone on the task force from the Commission on Disability weighing in on some of this, because I think, to your point, Jason, about sidewalks, I do like that, but I think the streets become a more viable option for safety reasons, and particularly for people who are disabled or in a wheelchair. And I heard a lot of concerns this summer about the inaccessibility of some of our sidewalk spaces because of outside dining. So I'd really like to see someone from the commission on this task force. Thanks.
Amy, what other direction do you need from us or actual decisions?
Well, I'll comment on a couple things, Melissa. Absolutely, with ADA and have those contacts and including them. And I need to reach out to them this week too, about event structures and other things. So definitely through this whole process, I got to know them and their requirements a whole lot better than I had. So absolutely. And that's part of the problem, not problem, part of the moving forward is making those permanent requirements, because we did allow for some things because of the pandemic. Absolutely. And as far as the fee things too, as well, we'll certainly bring this back, but basically it's not extensive, but it's a permit fee. And then a lot of towns, it's something we've looked at, have a common vicular, which is just the food service that bases the fee on number of seats. It's not extensive, but it's kind of how, and some of the restaurants have brought this up in the past, they make it fair. You know, if you have 1 to 50, it's then 50 to 75. So that's kind of how that works there as well. But we'll get into that detail when we get there. As far as more direction, I think we're going to continue and determine what the absolute parameters are here for you to look at, so that we have that for a decision and continue to move through these different groups. And you know, like to have a public, this yesterday I had was just with the restaurants, we have a more public gathering and meeting, just to hear some comments and feedback. And as you, Melissa, had a comment. I'm sorry, Jason, if Melissa.
That's fine. Go ahead, Melissa.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Amy. I'm happy to hear you say that about the sort of public comments, because I think, you know, currently the current makeup of the task force is probably a lot of people who are enthusiastic about this concept, but it has had its critics, and I think there has to be a venue for their voices and their concerns to be weighed. And this may be a little bit out of left field, but I'm sitting here thinking about, we're really focusing on our core downtown district. Would these, you know, would this open up consideration for any other places outside of the district, or do we need to sort of limit the geographic area? Is that equitable? So I'm starting to think about some of our outside restaurants who are just outside of the core district, for whom, you know, they may want to look at some other spaces that we have as town to provide outdoor dining. And then a third comment, and my final will be, this is a little bit outside of the scope of what we're talking about tonight, but there have been suggestions that if there's town property, could we do food truck night? And this all seems to be around this idea of people congregating outside and using public property for, you know, private benefits. So I don't want to go down that rabbit hole tonight, but I think whatever decisions we make from a policy perspective have to be equitable and look at the whole package, the whole island. Or if we're speaking just about downtown, make sure that's very clear. Thanks.
Amy?
So I'll try to answer a couple of those if I can. Certainly, I'm trying to think of other outside of downtown spaces, but we would have to set up sidewalk parameters. They would be pretty standard, and then an application would have to come in to see if they can meet those standards and if the location is obviously viable. And we certainly want to do that at the same time as others. So it's similar to, again, I'll say events where we're setting up parameters for folks to follow, and then we kind of work through that application. And then the other things we are certainly working on in the mobile units, trust me, the internal work group is working through that. So that'll be coming soon as well. So all those things are certainly under consideration. And yes, absolutely. Because there's a lot of ideas we certainly had through this that we weren't able to execute. So hopefully maybe we can build on that. That'd be more equitable as far as using public space for everyone.
Matt?
Yeah, just, and the mobile units is another equitable situation. You've got, if they're charged enough, then and the town receives the money, maybe it's worth it. But if they're not, then it's a, an inconvenience and it's a loss to the people who they're competing with. And so those are that, that's what I worry about. I've been in the industry a long, long time. And I think, I can see, there being winners and losers here, and we're picking them, and it's difficult. And as much, I think that there's some places that it looked amazing, that they really did fit in, and it worked well, and it didn't take up a lot of parking spaces, et cetera. Didn't hurt the flow too much, and I'm sure they did great. And there's others that I don't think it was quite that level. So this is going to be, it seems simple, but I don't think it is.
Thank you, Matt. I think a couple thoughts. The equitable thing, we've always been considering that through all of this. I think this board has, as much as possible through COVID, and we knew that it wasn't going to be completely equitable because not everybody had access to a sidewalk or a street, and did the best we could. So I'm glad that we're still thinking about that. I think some of my other thoughts are just as I'm listening to everybody, Christy, I do agree that it is family friendly, and that's and I think we did that well by shutting off the music and everything outside, so it wasn't just a loud party on the street and add to the non-family friendly kind of aspect that we all kind of want a little more of downtown, I think. So I think it worked. I think we did a good job over that. So I don't think that's an issue for this next year. I think HTC type things could be more enforced next year. So umbrellas, we might not want to see any logos. And I think the businesses, if they know they got it for a year or two, then they can go and buy them and not have to just kind of get freebies from their distributors, from their liquor companies. That's something I think I'd like to see, like really no logos at all, and maybe even get them some kind of parameters around that. And then I guess that leads into the enforcement, whether it's the original setup, there might be 5 feet for people to walk and it might be accessible, but then the next thing you know, it creeps in, and now it's 3 feet. Trash, cleaning up, how do we enforce that a little bit with some, I don't know what we can do with the state for fining, but there has to be something for, like you said, the bad players, Matt, who maybe are letting some things creep. That's all. Melissa?
Thanks. Just a final comment. I want to say thank you, Amy, and to the groups who have you been meeting with. I think there's some really great ideas that are come out of this, and it's a lot of additional work, but I think it's going to serve the community well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Melissa. Amy?
Just thank you. And, at the end of the day, I think, we'll work on this. I think it's worth exploring. Obviously, I think there was enough good that came from a lot of this that it's worth moving forward, at least exploring, even if, we baby step through it again. But, a lot of people were enthusiastic about it. And so I think that's worth it for us to do.
Anything else you need from us direction-wise, Amy?
I don't think so. I'll probably think of it later, but no, I just continue on that path with our internal group too as well, so that sooner than later we can provide what is recommended in those barriers, and we can have a more public discussion for folks. So we'll certainly communicate that out as soon as we can set that up and have a public discussion with businesses and in the community as well.
Does that need to be a public hearing if we're deciding on fees and that type of stuff?
Well, eventually for that, but just having a public discussion as far as just getting feedback and ideas and hearing people out, hearing folks out. But eventually it'll be public hearing on establishing the permit for sidewalks or other types of spaces, the fees, any additions to our current regulations that would have to be amended to allow for it. And then the other types of things. And then eventually it would be part of the usual alteration of premises process that we have when someone expands their current licensed premises. So just a heads up, there's probably going to be a lot of those because these private spaces all have to go through that process as well. So we'll try to organize that as best we can, but There's going to be, it's going to be a busy winter.
Just think if we had a licensing commission.
Yeah, can you imagine? We were working that way. We're all working internally on that together. So hopefully we'll be able to make it a little bit easier.
Thank you, Amy.
Okay, thank you.
Any select board comments, committee reports? Christie, nothing? Oh, Matt, there you go.
Yeah, not necessarily committees, but I just take a look at your mailboxes. I sent a New York Times article and it was talking about cities that are doing electric transit for all their buses and how amazing that is. They're talking about Norway and other places, sort of Seattle and Norway are going to electric ferries. And that's pretty, and that was pretty good. And my favorite one is they have gondolas in there. And you'll laugh, what's our gondola? You'll laugh, but someday when our roads are flooded, you'll wish we had gondolas to move the people. So anyway, take a look at it. The other one is you will get, you may be contacted by, I'll get her name wrong, Aisha Khan, if she hasn't already, about PFAS and the potential impact of putting 2 turf fields, on our litigation. And the companies that are doing the AstroTurf, et cetera. And I believe she also has information on the testing that was done on the similar turf on Martha's Vineyard. And I think we should all keep an open mind because it's, before we move, and not fall prey to the, sort of to, well, we've moved this far along, so we have to do it. I think, we should really take a look at that. And we may want to have I'd ask that we make that as a topic and have town council here that night to help us, with whether it will impact, whether installing those will impact our litigation, et cetera. So that's all I've got.
Thanks, Matt. Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, Don Holgate,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Christie Ferrantella,
Aye.
Matthew.
Aye.
For design, that passes. Thank you. Thanks, Libby. Thanks, Erica.